Welcome back to the Bluechip Breakdown, Vols fans. I'm your host, Bull, and this is going to be video number 2 where we're breaking down different positions on this team, looking at the rosters, and then looking at what we're doing on the recruiting trails to see how we're going to be able to supplement those losses that we are projecting to come up in 2025. Please make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. We're going to be doing linebackers and wide receivers today. So this is how our linebacker room looks currently. Starting off with the seniors, Keenan Pili, out of eligibility after this year. He's 25 years old. He's married. He's about to start having kids. He needs to go on to the NFL. This is going to be a very, very important season for him because this is going to make or break him, right? He's been very injury prone here lately, but if he stays healthy, he should be one of the better players in the entire league. And I'm not just talking about in the SEC, but in all of college football, regardless of position, because he can do it all. 6'3", 6'4", 240 pounds. And he moves very well. Okay, sideline to sideline linebacker, identifies plays quickly because he's played so much football. But he also can drop back into coverage, whether it's man or it's zone, and he can get after that passer. I just love everything about his game. Gets off of blocks with just extreme ease. He would be the prototype, I would, imagine for what Coach Inge is looking for in a linebacker. Again, size, length, speed, toughness, physicality, identifies plays well, and, again, moves well in space. So looking forward to a huge year from Keenan Pili. The next player is going to be Eli Purcell, who's a transfer, I believe, from Wofford. He, kind of a, walk-on type of a guy, might have a partial scholarship, something like that. He's not a player that you would necessarily expect to be getting a lot of playing time, but if we do get into a bind, I like what he can bring to us. He's a prototype Mike linebacker. He's going to be good from, B gap to B gap. He's going to play with extreme effort. He's going to be able to identify plays well. He's going to understand what's going on. But I don't know if he's as good of an athlete as we would want to be out there playing all the time in the SEC. The next player is Cody Duncan, who's a redshirt junior. He looked pretty good in the orange and white game. Same thing could be said about Eli Purcell. I didn't really touch on that, but they both look pretty good in the orange and white game, going up against second and third string guys. On to the juniors, Caleb Perry, 6'3", 6'4", 240 pounds, something like that. And he moves very well, similar to like a Keenan Pili, but he doesn't have necessarily that warrior mentality that you would see from Keenan Pili. He's not as physical, especially last year. This season, I've seen a lot more, okay? He has progressed up under Coach Inge, and I don't know if that's just Coach Inge or if it's him putting in more work or if it's a combination of both. But I am expecting for Caleb Perry to contribute a lot more this season. I would still probably say he's maybe fighting for a third or fourth spot with our depth because the sophomore class is where, really most of the talent is. But Caleb Perry can take that step forward, and he can bring a lot to this team. So we're going to keep a very close eye out on that. Next is going to be Ben Bolton, who's a redshirt sophomore. Looked pretty good in the orange and white game. He's another one that's more of a walk-on type of a body. You're not really expecting him to contribute as a starter out on defense, but maybe on special teams, he can give us, a whole lot more bang for our buck. Now on to the sophomores, like we just talked about. This is where most of the talent is with this room. Arion Carter, breakout senior season, and everyone in the entire country wanted him, and we can see why. He's got great size. I think he was probably about 6'2", 240 pounds, something like that last season. It's just a step too slow. We talked about that several times. Looks like this season he's lost some weight. Haven't seen him in the pads yet, but we are expecting him to be starting right there next to Keenan Pili, and he's going to be very similar to Keenan Pili in the way that he plays, just as far as being able to identify the runs and get there quickly, being able to drop back into pass coverage, whether it's man or it's zone. He played safety some in high school, and you can still see that twitching and see that burst. He's a guy that has a good opportunity to be like a first-round draft pick at linebacker. And I can say the same thing about the next player, who's Jeremiah Thielander. Love what he's been doing. Very similar to a Arion Carter, where you feel like, and really for everyone in the sophomore class, they all gained a little bit too much weight last season. They've cut that weight back, though. Well, outside of Jalen Smith, we'll get to him in just a second. But Jeremiah Thielander, just, he is a prototype linebacker. He's an absolute dog. He's a warrior. He loves the contact, right? Like, he likes to get to you and strike you and make you feel him. That's exactly what you need. But he's going to be playing behind Keenan Pili at the Mike position, and we mostly play nickel. So really only two linebackers are playing. Essentially, they're both going to be Mikes. But, one is going to be on the strong side. One's going to be on the weak side. So some things are going to be a little bit different. But with all these players, they should be able to very seamlessly transition from playing at the Mike or at the Will. Or, I don't know if they call it Sam. I don't know what they call the other linebacker in the system. It could be Will. But, I think that Jeremiah Thielander, we should be expecting a lot from him this season. He's going to play a bunch. Next is Jalen Smith. And as we kind of started to talk about, he did gained a little bit too much weight. He looks still a step slow this season. He's going to have to cut back some. It's going to be very important for him from, the end of spring through all of summer camp and then heading into fall camp to recreate his body and play with the speed that we saw in high school. Because if he does that, he's just as good as the top tier linebackers on this roster. And I would say that Jalen Smith and Caleb Perry are the ones that maybe are kind of fighting for that third or, fourth spot, however you want to look at it, or fourth or fifth spot. So now on to the true freshman, Edwin Spillman. We've seen him. We love his game. We said, pretty early on after we're hearing the coaches talking about, hey, man, we had to kind of pull him back because he loves the contact. That's one of the biggest transitions is, being able to physically compete at the next level from high school to college, from college to NFL. Edwin Spillman is showing that that's not going to be an issue for him. It's just going to be, can he pick up the playbook? Can he identify what the offense is trying to give to him or, what they're trying to do to him on a play in and play out basis? I think that he's not going to have a problem with that. He's going to have to play because Elijah Herring left us. So we're not necessarily shorthanded from a talent perspective, but we are short one body, you know what I mean? And that actually means a lot because that was a full scholarship body, right? Like it's not a walk-on guy, not to throw any shade at them because they're really good players, but it's just a difference in the level of talent. So Edwin Spillman, I am expecting for him to play a lot this season, definitely on special teams, but even as a real rotational piece. Honestly speaking, y'all, I will put Edwin Spillman right now maybe above Jalen Smith and maybe even competing a little bit more with Caleb Perry. I just need for Jalen Smith to get back to playing more fast. He could play physical, but he needs to play a lot more fast. Next player who is not up on campus yet is Jordan Burns. Now, he and I kind of felt like he was the better of the two between Edwin Spillman and himself coming into the 2024 class. I don't know how true that is at this point. We'll have to see what Jordan does, but he is a really good player. I would expect that if Edwin gets to get out there and get some playing time, that Jordan Burns could very easily do the exact same thing. So now we're talking about a pretty deep room, and we're seeing that the underclassmen is where most of the depth is, but we will be losing Keenan Pili. Okay, so let's actually take it down to the bottom right. Okay, we have a total of 10 linebackers inside of this room right now. We are projecting next season to have 7 to 9. Kind of all depends on what Caleb Perry does. If he has a really good season, he can work himself into a draft pick. But if he doesn't have an absolutely incredible season, he's probably going to be back with us next season. So I think that we're okay from a depth perspective, but let's talk about the recruiting trail for the linebackers. And y'all can see that it's not very many targets. I could be missing a player here or there, but this is pretty much what it's looked like from the start of the recruiting cycle. And Jaden Harmon, who's a player that he and I absolutely love. He's from here in Georgia. I think he plays at Rome High School, 4-star player, goes on to commit to Alabama. Now, he was actually trending towards Tennessee. We were his number one school. I have no idea what happened with that. Was it because we lost Coach BJ and then we switched to Coach Ings? I wouldn't blame it on Coach Ings, but maybe he felt a little bit more continuity with Coach BJ. Maybe he looked at the room and said, well, it's just a little bit too much depth there. I don't know, but he's one that we are still working on. Hopefully we can close him out on like a visit or something, get him up on campus because I think that he might be the best linebacker in this class, just as far as a pure linebacker goes. And then the next player is going to be Shady Lagonza Hayward. He's a 4-star, but he does play safety. He's a Tennessee lean. We've heard that he can kind of move down to linebacker. I think that he could as well. I would like to see how he looks in person because on film, he looks like he's about 6'2", 6'3". Looks like he has good length. Maybe can fill out some more, but sometimes I'm looking at him and I'm like, okay, well, maybe he's kind of filled out and he's at about 200 pounds. If he's filled out as much as it looks like in some of the views that I've seen of him, then it's going to be very tough for him to make that transition to linebacker. As we talked about with the players that we have up on campus already. You don't want him gaining too much weight and being a step slower because it takes away from his game. Speed kills. You've got to be able to maintain your speed to be really, productive in the SEC. So a little bit concerned about that, but hey, if the coaching staff feels like he can play linebackers, then I'm just going to take their word for it. But for sure, he's an absolute and total stud. He's one of my favorite players, if not my, favorite player, period, in this entire class. I just love his game. He's so versatile, and, he can do a whole lot of things for us once he gets up on campus. He will be visiting us June the 21st. Next player is Jaden Perlotti. He is currently a UGA commit. He's a 4-star guy, plays at Buford High School. I know him pretty well. I've seen him play for a long time. And I love his game too, because I know him on, more of a personal level. I understand what he is like mentally. He's exactly what you would want in a football player, but especially on defense, especially at linebacker. 6'3", right now about 215, 220 pounds. He's opened things back up, and Tennessee is definitely in the mix. I know that, Coach Inge was actually up there to see Jaden yesterday. So we're still working on him. Hopefully, Buford has a scrimmage tonight. Hopefully we'll have more coaches from the staff come up and talk to him, because almost every single day throughout spring, there's been a coach up there talking to Jaden. And I mean, there's a ton of players. I think there's like 30 D1 scholarship players at Buford. So there's a ton of coaches, but they're not all necessarily individually stopping in and talking to one player. But he is a guy that every single day someone's either talking to him or they're talking to his family. So he's very highly coveted. Tennessee does have their work cut out for him, but he is trending towards our Volunteers. I think that he would be perfect either at linebacker or at the star position for us, because he can kind of, if he sticks at the same size, he can play star at a very high level. He could come in and start at that position immediately. Then we can maybe move Boo Carter around somewhere else. But Jaden is a player that I would love for Tennessee to close out on for sure. Next one is going to be Jacoby Hobson. He's a 4-star Ole Miss commit. And I don't know if Tennessee can kind of sway him, but it does feel like we've got a little bit of momentum with him. Hopefully we can get him to commit to a visit, and then maybe we can kind of close the gap with Ole Miss. So that's how we're looking with the linebackers. I think we're in a pretty good spot. Again, let's try to close out on one of these guys or somebody else. We need another body in the 2025 class. All right, now on to the wide receivers. And we can see that this is a pretty deep room. If you look down to the bottom right, we have a total of 16 players currently. Next season, we are projecting to have between 10 to 14. I want for y'all to focus on this, though, because a lot of these players are more walk-on bodies. They're not true scholarship guys. But with the seniors, we've got Dante Thornton. He's probably going to be gone after this season. Hopefully, he could work himself into an NFL draft pick. 6'5", 220 pounds, something like that. Runs 24 miles an hour, I think. And he's a guy that we are expecting to kind of pick up where he left off at towards the end of last year before he got injured. So look out for Dante Thornton this year. Then the next one, Brew, we can't wait for him to come back. All right. I mean, it brings everything that we want in a wide receiver as far as making those tough catches, making those blocks. He's tremendous blocking. I know that we talk about a lot on this channel, but I don't know if people are talking about that enough. That cannot be overstated. With the quick screens that we do and stuff, that's an automatic 7 to 8 yards with Brew being that lead blocker. Very excited to see him come back. Next is going to be Jackson Locke. He's a redshirt junior. Not anticipating for him to play really at all this season, maybe some when the game is out of hand. On to the juniors. We've got Squirrel White. We all know what he brings to the table. He's that slot player for us. He can take the top off, but he also makes really tough catches. That's what I love about Squirrel. He's not the biggest guy, but he's a dog. You need a whole lot of that. We'll get to another player that's going to be right behind Squirrel in just a minute, who I feel like is very, very similar. And our, wide receiver core has gotten a lot deeper because of it. Next is Chris Brazel. He is a redshirt sophomore. He's the transfer from Tulane. Very long guy, 6'4", 6'5", about 200 pounds. He can high point the football. He's really fast. He also makes tough catches. He's looked really good throughout spring. I am anticipating that he's going to be a guy that we're going to be able to count on a lot. Reminds me a little bit of a Justin Hunter. He's that sort of a player, but he's a little bit bigger, I would say. He's more like Justin Hunter, when Justin Hunter was, I guess, like a junior, whenever he had gained some more weight. He's more there, but he may be even a little bit thicker. I think that he is a lot thicker than people realize, especially in his lower body. He's very strong. I can just tell that right now. So he also does a really good job blocking. And I could probably echo those same sentiments for all these players, but right now, Brew and Chris Brazel have been, probably the most dominant blockers that I've seen so far. On to the next player. That's Chaz Nimrod, another redshirt sophomore. He was one of our more consistent players last season, expecting for him to pick up where he left off at and give us a whole lot. Long guy, fast guy, he can make some things happen. And you just want to see him get more comfortable, right? Because sometimes you get so caught up in, man, I want to get to my spot. I just want to make this catch, which is great. But maybe this year he takes that next step where I'm getting to my spot, I'm making the catches, and now I'm making people miss. I'm fighting for extra yardage. Also really good as a blocker on the outside. Next is going to be Caleb Perry, next is going to be Caleb Webb, who is a redshirt sophomore. And he also has looked really good. I would say between him and Chaz, just as far as what we've seen, because it was more clips of Caleb than it was of Chaz, but I would say, man, Caleb Webb is maybe taking that step forward, and maybe he's passed up a Chaz Nimrod just a taste But who knows what happens for the rest of the offseason? Does Chaz kind of fight his way back? Do they keep on going back and forth, back and forth? That's the kind of competition that you want to have. Whole lot of talent in that class. Now, the next one's going to be Trey Weary, who's another redshirt sophomore. I believe he's a walk-on. Not expecting a whole lot from him. On to the sophomores, Jack Henry Jacobic. I don't know if I'm saying his name right. He is a redshirt freshman. Not quite sure that he's going to be playing very much. He is a walk-on guy. And then we've got Garrett Young, another redshirt freshman, another walk-on guy. Nathan Roberts, another redshirt freshman, another walk-on guy. Now on to Nate Spillman, who is a redshirt freshman. He is the older brother of Edwin Spillman. I would hope that he can work himself onto the field some type of a way this year because he's looking better. He's looking like he's picking up some weight. He's another one that understands how to play the game. You could tell that he's really strong at the point of contact. His hands are really good, runs great routes. I think that he can add a lot to this team. He's about 6'3", about 200 pounds, kind of working into that same Chaz Nimrod, Caleb Webb type of a body. So looking out for Nate Spillman this year. Dayton Sneed, he looked really good in the orange-white game. He's a redshirt freshman. I believe that he is also a walk-on. He may have a scholarship at this point, but he could end up getting some playing time for us this season. I feel comfortable with him going out there and giving us some reps, giving us some minutes. Don't know if it's going to happen just because this room, as you can see, is so deep. Now on to the next redshirt freshman. That is Nathan Leacock, 6'3", 6'4", 215, 220 pounds. He's the Brew McCoy. Once Brew McCoy leaves, at least that's what we want. That's what we're hoping. So happy that we retained him through spring because he didn't get to participate in spring. And last spring, he was having some drops, things like that. I think he was a little bit banged up as well. What does he do for the rest of the offseason is going to be critical. Out of all these players here, I think that, it's going to mean the most to him just because he is kind of getting to the point where, hey, you've got to get out on the field. Or does he want to transfer? You know what I'm saying? Or does he end up getting passed up with some younger guys? I think that he can do it. So watching out for Nathan Leacock, a lot of folks forgot about him, but he's a stud, okay? He is a workhorse. And if he puts it all together over the summer, watch out for him to have a really big season. On to the true freshman, Mike Matthews, 5-star coming out of high school from Parkview High School here in Georgia. He's a dog. Great routes, very smooth, extremely fast. He caught a touchdown, I think, in every scrimmage that they had in spring. Will he continue to do that over the summer? Going to be hard to keep him off the field. Next one, Braylon Staley. He's the one that I was talking about right there behind Squirrel White inside of the slot. Oh, yeah, he can go. He's a dog from South Carolina. Very similar to a Mike Matthews, right? Where he can do a lot of things. He's very physical. Not as big as a Mike Matthews, but he does have good size. He has long arms. He high points footballs well. He's going to make those tough catches. Again, man, he just reminds me so much of like a Squirrel 2.0, and he may have a little bit more of an upside because he's a little bit bigger than Squirrel already. You got to love this wide receiver room, though, okay? I know that some clown came out and tried to get some clickbait and said, hey, Tennessee's right on the outside of the top 10 wide receiver cores in the entire country. Well, he was wrong. We all know that. Tennessee, I would say that the ceiling for our wide receiver core is to get back to wide receiver U, the very best in the entire country. And I would say that our floor, honestly, would be, maybe fourth or fifth. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's no reason that I'm not going to say that that's our floor. Our floor would probably be maybe 8 or 9. But I would say that we can expect for this wide receiver core to perform, like the fourth or fifth best. Again, if everything comes together perfectly, we'll be talking about this as one of the potentially best wide receiver cores in the entire nation. Now on to the recruiting and the players that we're targeting. All right, so y'all can see there's a lot of names and information on this list. The first 2 players are going to be commits to our Volunteers. Radarius Jackson, 4-star. He's a tall, long, explosive player, extremely raw. I think that he's going to end up playing like a 5-star. Does he work in the slot? I think so. But can he also play outside? Absolutely. Reminds me a little bit of a Mike Matthews, but his game, like his style of play is different. He's a little bit more explosive, and I'm trying to see if there's anyone on the roster right now that I could, maybe compare him to. There really isn't, right? He's extremely twitchy. He's going to high point footballs. He's a combination of a lot of players. So he's going to be absolutely outstanding for our Volunteers. Next player is going to be Joakim Dotson, listed as the 3-star currently, but I feel like at the end of, everything, once it's all said and done, he's going to be a 4-star player. He has good size. He has good length. He runs good routes. He's going to make those tough catches. I feel like he's probably going to be an outside player for us. Also going to be really good blocking. Just kind of fits into the mold of what we look for in wide receivers. Now, let's talk about the players that we are trying to bring home on top of the 2 that we already have. We've heard from the insiders that we may only add 1 more player, but I think that it could be 2 depending on who those players are. We'll start off with Travis Smith. He's from Westlake High School here in Atlanta, Georgia. He's a 4-star. He will be visiting our Volunteers June the 21st. Right now, I believe that the battle is between us and Georgia. We know that he's visited Georgia several times. He really likes them. But one of the things that he said early on that stood out to me is he's looking for a school that can really maximize, his potential, that is going to use him the right way. And we all know that UGA doesn't really use their wide receivers. They've got a whole bunch of really good ones. Where do they end up getting drafted at, though? I mean, it's rare that they ever get drafted. If they get drafted, they don't get drafted as high as they probably should have gotten drafted. That's a better way for me to try to say it. Tennessee is going to maximize the potential. You are going to get a lot more targets. You are going to, be able to get a lot more stats and things like that playing here at Tennessee. So I feel like the longer things drag out for a guy like Travis Smith, the better position Tennessee's going to be in, because we know what this offense can do with a guy like Hendon Hooker at the helms. We saw, hey, we put 2 wide receivers in the NFL that season, but we've got even more talent this year with a guy like Nico who can get the ball out to everyone. So we are thinking that maybe our wide receiver room could have 3, 4, 5 guys get drafted or something like that happens. Yeah, why wouldn't Travis Smith and really anyone else that's on this list, why would they not want to come to Tennessee? So Travis Smith would be a guy that I feel like Tennessee is going to try to keep some room for, because he's long and he's everything that we need in an outside guy. That's more of what we're looking for at this point. Jamie French, 5-star wide receiver. He's from Florida. A lot of people have him projected to go to Ohio State. I'm at the point right now where I have no idea. He is going to be visiting us on June the 14th. I think Tennessee's still in a good spot. I know he's good friends with GMAC, so hopefully we can close out on him, but I wouldn't hold my breath on Jamie French. Again, he's kind of all over the place. Would love to have him, but I just don't see it being, a realistic possibility for Tennessee at this point. Caleb Cunningham, who's from Mississippi. A lot of folks say, hey, he's going to Ole Miss or he's going to Mississippi State. I don't know how true that is. He's a 5-star. He can go anywhere that he wants in the entire country. Also coming up on June the 14th. I would say that Tennessee would probably take maybe Jamie French or Caleb Cunningham. I don't know if we would take both, but I mean, probably. Like, why would you turn down a 5-star talent? I think that you probably have to take both. We'll see what happens with either one of those players. I don't know that we're in a great position with Caleb Cunningham, but we are still, I would say, in his top probably 5. Now on to Cam Sparks. This is a guy that is, living in Tennessee, playing in Tennessee, I believe at Baylor. And I think he's actually from Georgia, though, which kind of shocked me. But I saw him deadlifting 500 pounds. I want him on this team. All right. He's like 6'3", 200 pounds. He can do a lot of different things, even if he's not just playing wide receiver. We kind of talked about linebacker. I mean, hey, I'm going to tell you, he could play linebacker if we need him to. He's just a very special talent. I don't know what happened with him. I felt like he was going to be committing to Tennessee earlier on in the process. I think everyone did, but he's, taking his visits. He's taking his time with it. So the question was, do we fill up before he has an opportunity to commit to our Volunteers? At this point, it doesn't look like he will. I would hold a spot out for him. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but watching him play, I would most definitely hold a spot out for him, because finding those players that are not just those deep threats, but can make those tough catches and then get yak on top of it, that's extremely important. That's what you need in the SEC, and Cam Sparks fits all of that. Next player is Derek Meadows. He's a 4-star, another 6'4", 6'5" guy from Bishop Gorman out there in Las Vegas. Sounds like he's wanting to go to Notre Dame. I'm not sure how true that is. It's kind of what I've been reading, but the insiders feel like Tennessee has a really good shot. So he has not committed to a visit as far as I've been able to find. If he does, though, that would be huge, because bringing him up on campus, for, I believe, like a second or third time would be absolutely critical in being able to close out on him. I know that the staff covets him very, very highly. So we'd love to be able to close out on Derek Meadows. And for the rest of these players, I don't think that Tennessee is necessarily, I wouldn't say giving up on them, but I think that they're more on the outside looking in, because they're kind of, I would say, slot bodies, especially a guy like Marcus Harris, who is going to be visiting us on June the 7th. But I think he's probably going to be going to Texas, right? Between Texas and Oregon. Then we've got Phillip Bell, who's committed to USC. He's going to be visiting us on June the 18th. He's a 4-star. And then we've got Dejarion Miller. I hope I'm saying his name right. He is leaning towards Ole Miss, but he's going to be visiting our Volunteers on October the 18th. And then we've got Dylan Alfred, who is a 4-star, committed to Ole Miss. He's going to be visiting us October the 12th. So Tennessee's in a really good spot as far as, we're looking at right now, but we do need to close out on, I would say, at least one more player. We've got to make sure that we're doing that. And the great news for us is we've got several players that are going to be visiting us, and these guys will be making a decision, at least most of them, over the summer. So expect another wide receiver commitment or two coming up here in the next month or so. I think that Tennessee is trending for several players, not just a wide receiver, but also at linebacker. And, we're going to get this thing done, y'all. I love the way that this roster is built currently. I love the way that we are targeting talent for the future. And I'm going to tell you, I wish I could, in this video, can I talk about 2026 targets and players and where Tennessee's sitting at? Because we're in a really good spot there as well. But we'll talk about that on a different video. Thank y'all for sticking all the way to the end. Please make sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, share it with your friends, family, and other volunteer fans. And we'll see y'all in the next one. Thanks. Peace.